Tyre Nichols' family says they are relieved after a judge ordered all three officers on trial for his death to be taken into custody. The former Memphis police officers were convicted Thursday of witness tampering in connection to the death of Nichols back in January 2023. The 29-year-old died just steps away from his home as he was calling out for his mother. CNN's Shimon Prokupecz joins us now. Shimon, prosecutors were unable to get a conviction on the most serious civil rights charges for two of the officers. Do they see that as a setback?
Well, it's certainly, Boris, not the outcome that they wanted or expected here, right? I mean, this charge, the top count here on the civil rights, had to do with Tyre Nichols' death and the responsibility basically at the hands of these officers who were supposed to protect him, but they argued instead violated his civil rights and how they detained him and how they treated him and the fact that they didn't give him the level of care that he needed. So that jury decided that the prosecutors here, federal prosecutors in federal court, did not meet their burden, and so they've acquitted these officers of the top count. The top count, where if they were convicted, they could potentially would have spent the rest of their life in a federal prison. But instead, what you now have is these officers still facing a substantial amount of prison time, but certainly not on that top count. Today, this morning, the attorneys for the families are starting to react. Take a listen to what one of the attorneys said.
His mother and father and their family are relieved to know that all the officers will be held accountable. They could face up to 20 years in prison. And now we're going to be focused on the sentencing. We want the same thing to happen to those officers. What would have happened if the roles were reversed and Tyre would have been convicted of killing them and then conspiring to cover it up?
And Boris, there's also still a state case. The officers, there's 5 officers actually involved in this. 2 of them pleaded guilty to federal charges and were cooperating here with prosecutors. But there's still a state case where these officers are actually facing murder charges. That is set to go on trial at some point, perhaps at the end of the year. So the families will have to sit through this and relive a lot of that horrific video and a lot of that testimony yet again as they continue to seek accountability and justice for their son.
Shimon, has there been any reaction from the officers themselves or their attorneys?
No, there's been no reaction from the officers or their attorney. I mean, obviously they feel relieved in one sense, but one of the things that the attorneys here did was, as I said, there were these 2 officers who were involved in this, and they pleaded guilty, and they were cooperating with the government in this case. And what the defense attorneys here did for the other officers here was that they tried to paint a picture that actually those 2 officers were more responsible for what happened here. And when you look at this verdict, perhaps that worked in this case. So they thought that that was going to be a key thing for them, the defense attorneys, to paint those officers as the ones responsible for it, and it seems to have worked here.
And the Department of Justice, Shimon, was conducting a separate review of the use of force at the Memphis Police Department. What's the update there?
Yeah, so that's very much still ongoing, and these investigations take a really, really long time, and the Department of Justice could wait for the criminal investigations, the criminal cases to end before they take any kind of action, because they don't want to obviously affect the jurors' decision going forward. So, we could be looking to sometime next year before we hear the results of any of that investigation. But I was on the ground, Boris, when this happened, in the days after, and the community there certainly is playing a big role in that investigation. They certainly have felt for a long time that their rights were being violated by these officers, by officers from the Memphis Police Department, and also the unit. Remember, these officers were part of a plainclothes unit called the Scorpion Unit, and they would just drive around, really try to stop crime. They were a very, very aggressive unit, and that is something that certainly the Department of Justice is looking into. The unit has been disbanded as a result of what happened here, and there have been some changes at the Memphis Police Department as a result of what happened here.
Shimon Prokupecz, thank you so much.